Samuel Morrison never expected to find anything valuable in his ranch's waste heap. At 62, he had built an empire from nothing, turning a struggling cattle operation into one of Texas's most profitable agricultural businesses. His success came from careful planning, hard work, and an eye for overlooked opportunities. But on this particular morning in late September, what he discovered would challenge everything he thought he knew about value. The sun had barely risen over the rolling hills of Morrison Ranch when Samuel decided to inspect the waste disposal area behind the main barn. His foreman, Pete Rodriguez, had mentioned some unusual activity near the pile of discarded equipment, broken fencing, and old machinery that accumulated over decades of ranch operations. Samuel pulled on his worn leather boots and walked the quarter-mile path to investigate. The waste heap stood like a small mountain of forgotten ranch life. Rusted water tanks leaned against coils of barbed wire. Broken tractor parts jutted out at odd angles. Old feed containers and weathered lumber created a maze of shadows in the early morning light. Samuel had planned to hire a crew to haul most of it away, but the project kept getting delayed as more pressing ranch business demanded his attention. As he approached the pile, something caught his eye. A flash of movement near the base of the heap, where someone had apparently created a small shelter using an old tarp and some discarded wooden pallets. Samuel's first instinct was annoyance. Trespassers were a constant problem on large ranches, and he had dealt with his share of drifters and troublemakers over the years. He moved closer, his boots crunching on the dry grass and scattered debris. The shelter was more elaborate than he had first realized. Someone had carefully arranged the materials to create a windbreak and had even dug a small fire pit surrounded by stones. This was not the work of a casual trespasser passing through. Someone had been living here. "Hello," Samuel called out, his voice firm but not aggressive. "This is private property. You need to come out and explain what you're doing here." The tarp rustled, and slowly a small figure emerged. Samuel's breath caught in his throat. It was a girl, probably no more than 8 or 9 years old, with tangled brown hair and clothes that looked like they had not been washed in weeks. Her face was streaked with dirt, but her eyes were alert and intelligent. She clutched a small bundle of belongings against her chest and looked ready to run at the first sign of trouble. Samuel's anger evaporated instantly, replaced by concern and confusion. What was a child doing alone out here? Where were her parents? How long had she been living in this makeshift shelter? "It's okay," he said, softening his voice and crouching down to appear less intimidating. "I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Samuel. What's your name?" The girl studied him warily, clearly weighing whether to trust this stranger or bolt for the nearest fence line. After a long moment, she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Emma." "Emma," Samuel repeated gently. "That's a pretty name. How long have you been staying here, Emma?" She shrugged, still clutching her bundle. "A while." Samuel looked around the makeshift campsite with new eyes. Now he could see the careful thought that had gone into its construction. The girl had positioned the shelter to catch the morning sun, but stay shaded during the hot afternoon hours. She had gathered dry wood and stacked it neatly for her fire. A small collection of containers appeared to be set up for catching rainwater. This child had been surviving on her own with remarkable resourcefulness. "Are you hungry?" Samuel asked. "I was just about to head back to the house for breakfast. My housekeeper makes the best pancakes in the county." Emma's stomach chose that moment to growl loudly, betraying her hunger despite her cautious demeanor. A slight smile flickered across her face before she caught herself and returned to her serious expression. "I don't want to be any trouble," she said. The formal way she spoke surprised Samuel. Most children her age would have been crying or demanding to know where their parents were. This girl possessed a composure that seemed far beyond her years. "No trouble at all," Samuel assured her. "But before we go anywhere, I need to know if there's someone looking for you. Are your parents nearby? Do you have family who might be worried?" Emma's expression darkened, and she looked down at her feet. "My mama died 3 months ago. I don't have anybody else." The simple statement hit Samuel like a physical blow. This child had been completely alone for 3 months, somehow managing to survive by her wits and determination. He felt a mixture of admiration and heartbreak as he looked at her small, defiant figure. "I'm very sorry about your mama," Samuel said quietly. "That must have been very hard for you." Emma nodded, but did not elaborate. Samuel could see that talking about her loss was painful, so he did not press for details. There would be time for questions later. Right now, this child needed food, a bath, and a safe place to rest. "Would you like to come up to the house with me?" he asked. "You can have something to eat, and we can figure out what happens next. You have my word that no one will hurt you or force you to do anything you don't want to do." Emma studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to read his intentions. Whatever she saw there must have reassured her, because she nodded slowly. "Okay," she said, "but if you're lying to me, I'll run away again." Samuel could not help but smile at her fierce determination. "Fair enough. I wouldn't expect anything less." As they walked toward the main house, Emma stayed several steps behind, ready to flee if necessary. Samuel kept up a gentle conversation, pointing out various features of the ranch and telling her about the animals they might see along the way. Gradually, Emma began to relax slightly, even asking a few questions about the horses in the distant pasture. The Morrison Ranch house was an impressive structure that had grown over the years as Samuel's success increased. What had started as a modest farmhouse was now a sprawling complex with multiple wings, guest quarters, and modern amenities. But Samuel had always insisted on keeping the original kitchen at the heart of the home, and that was where he led Emma. Rosa Martinez had been Samuel's housekeeper and cook for over 15 years. A motherly woman in her 50s, she took one look at Emma and immediately went into protective mode. "Ay, Dios mío," she exclaimed, rushing over to the girl. "Look at you, Pequeña. You need food and a bath and clean clothes." Emma shrank back at Rosa's enthusiastic approach, but Samuel intervened smoothly. "Rosa, this is Emma. She's been having a tough time, and I've invited her to stay for breakfast. Could you fix something special for her?" Rosa's eyes met Samuel's over Emma's head, and years of working together allowed them to communicate without words. Rosa saw the concern in Samuel's expression and immediately understood that this was a delicate situation requiring patience and care. "Of course," Rosa said, modulating her voice to a gentler tone. "Emma, do you like pancakes? I was just about to make some with fresh strawberries from the garden." Emma nodded shyly, and Rosa beamed at her. "Wonderful. You sit right here at this counter, and you can watch me cook. Samuel, you go clean up. You have dirt all over your shirt from poking around in that waste pile." As Rosa busied herself with breakfast preparations, she kept up a steady stream of gentle chatter, describing what she was doing and asking Emma's simple questions that did not require elaborate answers. Samuel watched from across the kitchen as the girl began to relax under Rosa's maternal attention. Over the next hour, as Emma ate a substantial breakfast with obvious hunger, Samuel learned more about her situation. Her mother had been a single parent who worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. When she became ill with cancer, they had quickly exhausted their savings on medical bills. After her mother's death, Emma had been placed temporarily with a distant relative who made it clear she was not welcome. Rather than wait to be shuffled into the foster care system, Emma had run away, living rough and moving from place to avoid being caught. "How did you end up here?" Samuel asked gently. "I was following the river," Emma explained. "I knew if I stayed near water, I could survive. When I got tired, I just saw all that stuff piled up and thought it would be a good place to hide for a few days. Nobody ever came back there, so I stayed." Samuel marveled at the girl's survival instincts. She had been living off wild berries, edible plants she had learned to identify, and the occasional fish she could catch with improvised gear. When she needed supplies, she would walk into town and do odd jobs for store owners in exchange for food or small amounts of money. "Weren't you scared, living out there alone?" Rosa asked, clearly moved by the girl's story. Emma shrugged. "Sometimes, But being scared is better than being somewhere you're not wanted. The matter-of-fact way she said this broke Samuel's heart. No child should have to make such calculations about their own safety and worth. As the morning progressed, Samuel found himself studying Emma with growing fascination. Despite everything she had been through, there was something remarkable about her spirit. She was polite but not servile, grateful but not desperate. She asked intelligent questions about the ranch and listened carefully to the answers. When Rosa showed her around the kitchen, Emma proved to be a quick learner, picking up cooking techniques with surprising ease. But it was when Emma began to talk about her dreams that Samuel truly began to understand what made her special. "I want to have my own land someday," she said as they sat on the back porch after lunch. "Not a big ranch like this, but maybe a small farm where I can grow things and take care of animals. My mama always said that land is the only thing that truly belongs to you, because you can work it with your own hands and make it produce something valuable." Samuel was struck by the sophistication of her thinking. Most adults struggled to understand the relationship between hard work, ownership, and value creation. Yet this 9-year-old had grasped concepts that formed the foundation of successful business. "That's a good dream," Samuel said. "What kind of things would you want to grow?" Emma's eyes lit up as she described her vision. She had clearly given this considerable thought, talking about crop rotation, soil management, and the importance of diversifying income streams through multiple products. Samuel realized she must have absorbed these concepts from listening to her mother discuss their financial struggles and possible solutions. As afternoon turned to evening, Samuel faced a decision he had never expected to confront. He could not simply send this remarkable child back into the world alone. The proper thing to do would be to contact social services and ensure she was placed in appropriate care. But something told him that the bureaucratic system would not appreciate Emma's unique qualities or provide the kind of environment where her potential could flourish. That evening, after Emma had been settled in one of the guest rooms with clean clothes borrowed from Rosa's granddaughter, Samuel made some phone calls. His lawyer, his accountant, and a few other trusted advisors found themselves fielding unusual questions about guardianship, foster care, and the legal requirements for taking responsibility for an orphan child. The more Samuel learned about the process, the more convinced he became that Emma needed something different than what the system typically offered. She needed stability, education, and, most importantly, she needed someone who understood that her tough experiences had given her valuable insights rather than just trauma to overcome. Late that night, Samuel sat in his study, looking out at the dark landscape of his ranch. Somewhere out there was the waste heap where he had found Emma that morning. In a few hours, his life had been turned upside down by a small girl with extraordinary resilience and wisdom. Samuel had built his fortune by recognizing value where others saw only problems. Abandoned equipment could be repaired and repurposed. Depleted land could be restored with the right approach. Struggling businesses could be turned around with proper management and care. Now, he found himself wondering if the same principles might apply to a discarded child who had somehow found her way to his doorstep. Emma was not waste to be disposed of or a problem to be solved by others. She was a person of remarkable potential who deserved the chance to flourish. As Samuel finally headed to bed, he had already begun to form a plan. Tomorrow, he would begin the process of exploring whether he could become Emma's guardian. It would not be easy, and there would be many legal hurdles to overcome. But Samuel Morrison had not built his empire by avoiding difficult challenges. He paused at the top of the stairs and listened to the quiet sounds of his house at night. Somewhere down the hall, a small girl was sleeping safely for the first time in months. Whatever tomorrow brought, Samuel was determined to ensure that Emma would never again have to build a shelter from waste and debris. The quiet ranch mogul had found something precious in his refuse pile, and he was not about to let it be discarded again. The next 3 weeks passed like a whirlwind of phone calls, meetings, and paperwork that would have overwhelmed most people. Samuel Morrison, however, approached the challenge of becoming Emma's legal guardian with the same methodical determination that had built his ranching empire. Every obstacle was simply another problem to solve. Every bureaucratic requirement, just another business negotiation to navigate. Emma, meanwhile, began to settle into life at Morrison Ranch with remarkable adaptability. Rosa had taken the girl under her wing, teaching her not just cooking and household skills, but also basic lessons that had been interrupted by her months of survival living. Emma proved to be an eager student, absorbing information like a sponge and asking questions that often surprised the adults around her. Samuel found himself looking forward to his conversations with Emma each evening. After completing his daily ranch business, he would seek her out, usually finding her helping Rosa in the kitchen or sitting on the back porch with one of the books from his library. Their talks revealed more about Emma's remarkable mind and the depth of her understanding about life's harsh realities. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Emma asked one evening as they watched the sunset from a porch. Her directness had become familiar to Samuel, but the question still caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" he replied, though he suspected he knew exactly what she was asking. "The lawyer visits, all those papers you keep signing, the phone calls about schools and stuff. You don't even know me, not really. Why would you want to get stuck with taking care of someone else's kid?" Samuel was quiet for a moment, considering how to answer honestly without overwhelming her with adult complexities. "When I found you living in that waste heap, it reminded me of something," he said finally. "When I first inherited this ranch from my uncle, it was in terrible shape. The house was falling apart, the land was overgrazed, and everyone told me I should just sell it and walk away. But I saw something in this place that other people missed. With the right care and attention, it could become something extraordinary." Emma listened intently, her young face serious as she processed his words. "You think I'm like a broken-down ranch?" she asked, and Samuel was relieved to hear a note of humor rather than offense in her voice. Samuel chuckled. "Not broken down. I think you're like this ranch was before I fixed it up, full of potential that just needs the right environment to flourish. The difference is that you've already proven you're strong and resourceful. You just need a chance to show what you can really do. And you want to give me that chance?" "I want to give us both that chance," Samuel said. "I've spent 40 years building this ranch, but I don't have any children to pass it on to. Maybe we can help each other." Emma was quiet for a long time, staring out at the rolling hills that were becoming familiar to her. When she spoke again, her voice was thoughtful. "My mama used to say that everything happens for a reason, even the bad stuff. She said that sometimes you have to go through hard times to appreciate the good ones when they come along. Your mama sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was. She would have liked you, I think. She always said the measure of a person is how they treat someone who can't do anything for them in return." Samuel felt a lump form in his throat. This child had an understanding of human nature that rivaled people 3 times her age. The legal process of gaining guardianship proved more complex than Samuel had initially anticipated. Emma's situation fell into several bureaucratic gray areas that required careful navigation. Since she had run away from her previous placement and had been missing for months, there were concerns about her well-being and the circumstances that had led to her disappearance. Margaret Shunn, the social worker assigned to Emma's case, was initially skeptical of Samuel's motives. A successful businessman in his 60s suddenly wanted to take responsibility for a runaway child raised red flags that had to be thoroughly investigated. "Mr. Morrison, I have to ask some difficult questions," Margaret said during one of their meetings at the ranch. "You're a wealthy, single man with no previous experience with children. Why Emma? Why now?" Samuel had expected this question and had prepared his answer carefully. "Because she deserves better than what the system has given her so far," he said bluntly. "This child has survived 3 months on her own through intelligence and determination. She's not damaged goods that need fixing. She's a remarkable person who needs stability and opportunity." Margaret made notes on her clipboard. "And what can you provide that a traditional foster family couldn't?" "Resources, education, and a future," Samuel replied. "I can ensure she gets the best schooling available. I can provide her with opportunities to learn about business, and agriculture if that's what interests her. And I can promise her that she'll never have to worry about basic security again. Those are material things, Mr. Morrison. What about emotional support? Family connections? The things a child needs to develop normally? Samuel gestured toward the kitchen, where they could hear Emma laughing with Rosa over some cooking mishap. Rosa has already become like a grandmother to her. My ranch hands treat her like a beloved niece. Pete's been teaching her to ride horses, and she's become fascinated with animal husbandry. Emma isn't lacking for emotional connections. She's building a whole network of people who care about her. Over the following days, Margaret conducted extensive interviews with everyone who had interacted with Emma since her arrival at the ranch. The picture that emerged was of a child who was not just surviving, but beginning to thrive in her new environment. Rosa was particularly vocal in her support of Samuel's guardianship petition. That little girl has brought life back to this house, Rosa told Margaret. Mr. Morrison has always been a good man, but he's been lonely for years. Emma gives him purpose beyond just making money, and she's not taking advantage of his kindness. She works hard, she's respectful, and she's eager to learn. They're good for each other. Pete Rodriguez echoed similar sentiments. Emma asks more questions about ranch operations than most of my adult workers, he told Margaret. She wants to understand how everything works from the business side to the practical side. Boss man lights up when he's explaining things to her. Haven't seen him this engaged in years. The turning point came when Margaret interviewed Emma herself. The social worker had expected to find either a traumatized child or one who had been coached to give appropriate answers. Instead, she found a thoughtful, articulate girl who spoke honestly about her experiences and her hopes for the future. Do you want to stay here with Mr. Morrison? Margaret asked directly. Yes, Emma replied without hesitation. This is the first place I've felt safe since my mama died. But you barely know him. Aren't you worried about living with a stranger? Emma shook her head. He's not a stranger anymore. And he's shown me that he keeps his promises. He said no one would hurt me or force me to do anything I didn't want to do. And that's been true. He said he would try to help me stay here. And he's doing everything he can to make that happen. What do you like about living here? Emma's face lit up as she began to describe her daily routine. She talked about helping Rosa with cooking and learning about nutrition and food preservation. She described her riding lessons with Pete and how she was learning to care for the horses. Most enthusiastically, she talked about the time she spent with Samuel, learning about the business aspects of running a ranch. Mr. Morrison doesn't talk to me like I'm just a kid, Emma explained. He explains things properly, like how you decide which crops to plant based on soil conditions and market prices. He's teaching me to read financial statements so I can understand how businesses work. He says if I'm going to own land someday, I need to understand all aspects of agriculture, not just the farming part. Margaret was impressed despite herself. Most 9-year-olds had no interest in financial statements or market analysis, but Emma spoke about these concepts with genuine enthusiasm. Is there anything you don't like about living here? Margaret asked. Emma considered the question carefully. Sometimes I feel bad about causing so much trouble and expense for Mr. Morrison. All those lawyer meetings and paperwork because of me. I worry that maybe he'll decide it's too much hassle and change his mind. Have you talked to him about these concerns? Yes. He told me that anything worth doing requires effort, and that taking care of important things is never a hassle. He said his lawyer bills are cheaper than what he spends on feed for his cattle each month, so I shouldn't worry about the money. Margaret smiled at this practical reassurance, so typical of what she was learning about Samuel Morrison's straightforward approach to problem solving. The breakthrough in the legal proceedings came when Margaret's supervisor reviewed the case file and interviewed the key participants. The evidence was overwhelming that Emma was not only safe and well cared for at Morrison Ranch, but was thriving in ways that would be difficult to replicate elsewhere. This isn't a typical placement, the supervisor acknowledged, but it's clearly in the child's best interest to remain where she is. Mr. Morrison has demonstrated both the resources and the commitment necessary to provide appropriate care. The formal guardianship hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in late October. Samuel hired one of the state's most experienced family law attorneys, but he was still nervous as they prepared to face the judge. "What if they decide I'm not suitable?" he asked his lawyer the night before the hearing. "Based on the social services recommendation and the evidence we've presented, that's extremely unlikely," the attorney assured him. "But even if there were complications, you've created such a strong foundation for Emma's well-being that any judge would be reluctant to disrupt it." The hearing itself was surprisingly brief. Judge Patricia Williams reviewed the case file, listened to testimony from Margaret Shun and several character witnesses, and then asked Emma a few direct questions about her preferences and her understanding of the arrangement. "Emma, do you understand that if I approve this guardianship, Mr. Morrison will be legally responsible for your care and will make decisions about your education, medical care, and other important matters?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you're comfortable with that arrangement?" "Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Morrison has already shown me that he makes good decisions and that he cares about what's best for me." Judge Williams nodded and made a few notes on her paperwork. After a brief consultation with the court clerk, she announced her decision. "Based on the evidence presented and the clear best interests of the child, I hereby approve the petition for guardianship. Mr. Morrison, you are now Emma's legal guardian, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." The courtroom erupted in quiet celebration as Samuel, Emma, Rosa, and Pete hugged and congratulated each other. Margaret Shun even smiled as she shook Samuel's hand and wished them both well. As they drove home from the courthouse, Emma was unusually quiet. Samuel worried that the formal legal proceedings might have overwhelmed her or made the reality of her situation feel too permanent. "Having second thoughts?" he asked gently. Emma shook her head. "No, just thinking about my mama. I wish she could have met you. She would have been so happy to know that I found a safe place to land." Samuel felt his eyes water as he reached over and squeezed Emma's hand. "I think she knows," he said quietly, "and I think she will be very proud of how strong and smart her daughter turned out to be." That evening, Rosa prepared a special dinner to celebrate the official beginning of Emma's new life as part of the Morrison family. As they sat around the kitchen table sharing stories and laughter, Samuel reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in just a few weeks. He had gone from being a successful but solitary businessman to being responsible for shaping a young person's future. The challenge was both terrifying and exhilarating. But as he watched Emma enthusiastically describing her plans for a vegetable garden in the spring, Samuel knew he had made the right decision. Later that night, as Emma got ready for bed in what was now officially her own room, she knocked on the door of Samuel's study. "Can I ask you something?" she said, peeking around the door. "Of course. What's on your mind? When you found me in that waste pile, did you ever think it would lead to all this?" Samuel leaned back in his chair and considered the question. "Honestly, no. I thought I was dealing with a trespasser who needed to be moved along. I never imagined I would find someone who would change my entire life." Emma smiled. "Good. I was worried that maybe you planned the whole thing, like you were looking for a kid to adopt or something. It's better knowing it just happened naturally." "Why is that better?" "Because it means it's real. When something is meant to be, it doesn't need to be forced or planned. It just works out the way it's supposed to." As Emma headed off to bed, Samuel sat in his study for a long time, thinking about her words. He had spent his entire adult life planning and strategizing, trying to control outcomes through careful preparation and hard work. But the most important thing that had ever happened to him had come completely out of nowhere, hidden in a pile of discarded materials he had been planning to throw away. Sometimes Samuel realized the most valuable discoveries came not from seeking them out, but from being open to recognizing them when they appeared in unexpected places. Winter on Morrison Ranch brought new challenges and unexpected revelations. Emma's first few months as Samuel's ward had been relatively easy, with warm weather and the novelty of her situation carrying them through the adjustment period. But as temperatures dropped and the ranch settled into its slower winter rhythm. Both guardian and child had to navigate deeper questions about their evolving relationship. Emma's formal education became the first major issue to resolve. The local public school was adequate, but Samuel wanted to ensure she had access to opportunities that matched her intellectual capabilities. After consulting with educational specialists, they decided on a combination approach that would challenge Emma academically while allowing her to maintain her connection to ranch life. 3 mornings a week, Emma attended classes at a private academy in the nearby town of Cedar Falls. The 40-minute drive each way gave Samuel and Emma time to talk about her studies and discuss what she was learning. The academy's small class sizes and advanced curriculum proved to be exactly what Emma needed. Her teachers were consistently impressed by her curiosity and her ability to connect abstract concepts to real-world applications. Emma has an unusual gift for seeing the practical implications of theoretical knowledge, her mathematics teacher told Samuel during a parent conference. When we study statistics, she immediately starts asking about how those concepts apply to livestock breeding or crop yields. Most students struggle to understand why they need to learn these subjects, but Emma sees the connections everywhere. The other 2 days of the week, Emma engaged in what Samuel called practical education on the ranch. Pete Rodriguez had become her unofficial instructor in animal husbandry, teaching her everything from basic veterinary care to the complexities of breeding programs. Rosa continued her cooking and household management lessons, but had expanded the curriculum to include food preservation, nutrition planning, and even basic accounting for household expenses. Samuel himself took charge of Emma's business education, introducing her to concepts that most people didn't encounter until college or beyond. They would spend hours in his study, reviewing financial statements from various ranch operations and discussing market trends that affected agricultural pricing. Why did cattle prices drop so much last month? Samuel would ask, pointing to a chart showing market fluctuations. Emma would study the data carefully before answering. It looks like there was oversupply because of that drought in the eastern states. When ranchers had to sell off herds early because they couldn't feed them, it flooded the market and drove prices down. And what does that mean for our operations here? We should probably hold off on selling our cattle for a few more months if we can afford to keep feeding them. Prices will likely recover once the oversupply gets absorbed. These conversations amazed Samuel not just because of Emma's analytical abilities, but because of her intuitive understanding of cause and effect in complex systems. She grasped concepts that many business school graduates struggled with, but more importantly, she understood how different factors interconnected and influenced each other. As winter deepened, Emma's personality continued to unfold in ways that constantly surprised Samuel. The cautious, guarded child he had found in the waste heap gradually revealed herself to be naturally confident and decisive when she felt secure in her environment. She had strong opinions about ranch operations and wasn't shy about sharing them, even when they challenged conventional approaches. Why don't we try raising heritage breed chickens instead of the commercial ones? Emma asked one day as they walked past the chicken coops. What's wrong with the chickens we have? Samuel replied, genuinely curious about her thinking. They lay a lot of eggs, but the eggs all taste the same, and the chickens themselves can't survive without constant medical intervention. Heritage breeds are hardier, the eggs taste better, and people in town would pay more for them because they're seen as premium products. Samuel had to admit she had a point. The ranch's current chicken operation was efficient but unremarkable. Emma was suggesting a shift toward higher quality, lower volume production that could command better prices. How would you research whether that approach would be profitable? He asked. Emma's eyes lit up at the challenge. I'd start by surveying restaurants and grocery stores in town to see what they'd be willing to pay for heritage eggs. Then, I'd research the costs of different breeds, including initial purchase, feed requirements, and expected lifespan. Finally, I'd calculate the break-even point and determine if the profit margins justify the switch. That's exactly the right approach, Samuel said, impressed once again by her systematic thinking. Why don't you put together a business proposal and present it to me next week? This became a pattern throughout the winter months. Emma would identify opportunities for improvement or expansion in various ranch operations, and Samuel would challenge her to develop comprehensive plans for implementation. Her proposals were consistently well-researched and financially sound, demonstrating a level of business acumen that would have been remarkable in an adult, much less a 10-year-old. But Emma's abilities extended beyond analytical thinking. She had an intuitive understanding of people and relationships that proved invaluable in managing ranch personnel. When two of Samuel's longtime workers got into a dispute over equipment usage, Emma quietly observed the situation and offered insights that helped Samuel resolve the conflict. Tommy isn't really mad about the equipment scheduling, she told Samuel after watching the argument unfold. He's upset because his daughter is sick and he's worried about missing work to take care of her. He's taking his frustration out on Mike because he can't control the real problem. Samuel investigated and discovered that Emma was absolutely right. Tommy's daughter had been diagnosed with a chronic condition that required frequent medical appointments, and Tommy was torn between his family responsibilities and his financial need to work. Once Samuel understood the real issue, he was able to arrange a flexible schedule that accommodated Tommy's needs without disrupting ranch operations. "How did you figure that out?" Samuel asked Emma later. "People usually aren't fighting about what they say they're fighting about," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "They're fighting about whatever is making them feel helpless or scared. Once you figure out what that is, you can usually help solve the real problem." This wisdom came from Emma's own experiences with loss and uncertainty, but she had transformed those painful lessons into practical tools for understanding human nature. Samuel found himself regularly seeking her perspective on personnel issues and business relationships. The winter also brought Emma's first real test of belonging at Morrison Ranch. In February, Samuel's nephew David came for an extended visit, bringing with him questions about Samuel's sudden guardianship and its implications for the family's future. David Morrison was 35 years old, recently divorced, and struggling to establish his own career in commercial real estate. He had always assumed that he would eventually inherit Morrison Ranch, and Emma's presence clearly threatened that expectation. "Uncle Sam, I need to understand what's happening here," David said during his first evening at the ranch. "You've taken legal responsibility for this girl, but what does that mean for the ranch's future, for the family?" Samuel had been expecting this conversation, but Emma's presence made it more complicated. She was in the living room doing homework when David raised the subject, and Samuel decided it was better to address the questions openly rather than sending her away. "Emma is part of this family now," Samuel said clearly. "That means she has the same claim on this ranch's future as any other family member." David's face flushed with obvious displeasure. "But Uncle Sam, she's not actually family. She's a charity case you picked up. You can't just rewrite the family legacy for some random kid." The room fell silent, except for the crackling of the fireplace. Emma had stopped working on her homework and was staring at David with an expression Samuel couldn't quite read. "David," Samuel said quietly, his voice carrying a warning tone, "I suggest you choose your next words very carefully." But Emma spoke before David could respond. "You're right," she said, closing her textbook and looking directly at David. "I'm not family by blood, and Samuel didn't have to take responsibility for me. But I think you're wrong about what makes someone family, and you're definitely wrong about what gives someone a claim on something like this ranch." David looked surprised that Emma was responding to him directly. "Oh, really? And what would you know about family legacy? I know that my mama worked 3 jobs to take care of me, and when she got sick, she spent everything we had trying to stay alive long enough to see me grow up. I know what it means to sacrifice for someone you love. And I know that real family is about who takes care of you when you need it, not just who shares your DNA." Emma stood up and walked over to where Samuel was sitting. Samuel found me living in a pile of garbage, And instead of just calling the police or social services, he saw something in me worth protecting. He spent months fighting bureaucrats and lawyers to make sure I have a safe place to live. He's teaching me everything he knows about business and agriculture because he wants me to succeed in life. That's what family does. She turned back to David, her young face serious but not confrontational. As for what gives someone a claim on this ranch, I think it should be whoever will take the best care of it and continue the work Samuel has put into building it. If you want that to be you, maybe you should start by showing that you understand what this place really means and what it takes to run it successfully. David stared at Emma in shock. He had clearly expected either a frightened child or a defensive response. Instead, he faced a composed young person who had effectively turned the challenge back on him. Samuel felt a surge of pride in Emma's measured response, but he also recognized the need to address the underlying family tensions. "David, you're welcome here anytime, and you'll always be my nephew," Samuel said. "But Emma is right about one thing. This ranch will go to whoever demonstrates the capability and commitment to preserve what we've built here. That could be you, it could be Emma, or it could be someone we haven't thought of yet. But it will be based on merit, not just inheritance." The conversation ended awkwardly, with David clearly unhappy about the turn of events. Over the following days, however, something interesting happened. Whether motivated by pride or genuine curiosity, David began paying closer attention to ranch operations and asking more substantive questions about the business. Emma, for her part, went out of her way to include David in her learning activities. She invited him to join her sessions with Pete, shared her business proposals with him, and asked for his input on various projects. Her generosity of spirit gradually wore down his initial resentment. "You know, she's pretty remarkable," David admitted to Samuel after a week of observing Emma in action. "I was expecting some traumatized kid who will be dependent on your charity forever. But she's actually contributing to this place. Hell, some of her ideas are better than anything I would have come up with. She's had to grow up faster than most children," Samuel replied. "But she's used those experiences to develop wisdom instead of bitterness. That's a rare quality in anyone, regardless of age." The real turning point came when David found Emma in the barn one morning, caring for a sick calf with obvious expertise and compassion. The calf had been born prematurely and required around-the-clock attention to survive. "How did you learn to do that?" David asked, watching Emma efficiently administer medication and monitor the animal's vital signs. "Pete taught me the basics, but mostly I read veterinary manuals and practiced on healthy animals first," Emma replied. "This little guy needs extra care because he didn't get enough time to develop properly in the womb. If we can keep him alive for another few weeks, his immune system should catch up and he'll be fine." David watched as Emma gently adjusted the calf's bedding and made notes in a logbook tracking its progress. "Why you care so much?" he asked. "I mean, from a business perspective, it might be more cost-effective to just let nature take its course." Emma looked up at him with surprise. "Because he's depending on us. When you take responsibility for something, you don't abandon it just because it becomes difficult or expensive. Samuel could have saved himself a lot of trouble by not getting involved in my situation, but he didn't walk away when things got complicated." The parallel was obvious, and David felt a flush of shame at his own initial reaction to Emma's presence. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "When I first arrived, I was thinking about this place like it was just an asset to be inherited. But watching you work, seeing how much you care about every aspect of the operation, I realized I had it backwards." Emma smiled at him. "You don't owe me anything. But if you really want to be part of this place, you should spend more time learning how it actually works. Samuel would love to teach you the same things he's been teaching me." By the end of David's visit, the family dynamic had shifted completely. Instead of seeing Emma as a threat to his inheritance, David began to see her as a potential partner in preserving and expanding the ranch's legacy. He started making plans to spend more time at the ranch, learning the business from Samuel, and working alongside Emma on various projects. "Maybe the ranch is big enough for both of us," David told Emma on his last evening at the ranch. "I think it's big enough for anyone willing to work hard and care about doing things right," Emma replied. "That's what Samuel taught me." As winter gave way to early spring, Samuel reflected on how Emma had not only adapted to her new life, but had begun to transform the ranch in subtle but important ways. Her presence had brought new energy and perspectives that enriched everyone around her. Even more significantly, she had forced Samuel and David to examine their assumptions about family, legacy, and what it meant to truly belong somewhere. The quiet ranch mogul had indeed found something precious in that waste heap, but Emma was proving to be far more valuable than even he had initially realized. She wasn't just surviving in her new environment. She was helping to shape its future in ways that would benefit everyone who called Morrison Ranch home. Spring brought new growth to Morrison Ranch, both literally and figuratively. Emma's first full year as Samuel's ward had established a foundation of trust and routine, but it was in her second spring that her true potential began to bloom in ways that surprised everyone around her. The transformation started with Emma's Heritage Chicken Project. After spending the winter developing her business proposal, she had convinced Samuel to let her convert one of the smaller barns into a specialized poultry operation. Her research had been thorough and her financial projections conservative but promising. Samuel approved the project as much for its educational value as for its potential profitability. Emma threw herself into the work with characteristic intensity. She studied breed characteristics for weeks before selecting Buff Orpington and Rhode Island Red chickens for their hardiness and egg-laying capabilities. She designed the barn layout to maximize efficiency while ensuring the birds had access to outdoor areas for foraging. Most impressively, she developed a detailed marketing plan that targeted local restaurants and farmers markets. "I need to understand our customers before we start production," Emma explained to Samuel as she prepared for her first sales calls. "What do they value most? Is it the taste difference, the ethical treatment of the animals, or the local production? Different customers will have different priorities, and our marketing message should address those specific concerns." Samuel watched with amazement as his 11-year-old ward conducted herself with professionalism that would have impressed veteran salespeople. She prepared sample materials, practiced her presentation, and anticipated potential objections with strategic responses. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Within a month of launching production, Emma's Heritage eggs were being sold at premium prices to 3 upscale restaurants and 2 specialty grocery stores. The operation was not only profitable, but had a waiting list of potential customers. More importantly, Emma's success attracted attention from agricultural extension agents and university researchers who were studying sustainable farming practices. Dr. Sarah Chun from the State Agricultural College contacted Samuel to request a visit to observe Emma's operation. "We've heard remarkable things about your young entrepreneur," Dr. Chun told Samuel during their phone conversation. "Would it be possible to include her operation in our case study of innovative small-scale agriculture?" The visit from Dr. Chun and her research team proved to be a turning point for Emma. The academics were initially skeptical that a child could have developed such a sophisticated approach to agricultural business, but their skepticism quickly turned to enthusiasm as Emma demonstrated her knowledge and methods. "How did you decide on your feed mixture?" Dr. Chun asked as they toured the chicken facility. "I analyzed the nutritional requirements for optimal egg production and compared them to the nutritional content of various feed options," Emma replied confidently. "The commercial feeds were efficient but expensive. By mixing my own feed from bulk ingredients, I reduced costs by 30% while actually improving the nutritional profile." Dr. Chun made notes furiously as Emma continued her explanation, describing how she had tested different formulations and tracked their effects on egg production and quality. "And the free-range aspect? How do you manage predator control while allowing foraging access?" Emma led them to a series of movable enclosures that allowed the chickens to access fresh pasture while remaining protected. The enclosures are rotated every 3 days to prevent overgrazing and ensure the birds always have access to fresh insects and plant matter. The rotation schedule also helps break parasite cycles naturally, reducing our need for medical interventions. By the end of the visit, Dr. Chun was thoroughly impressed. "Emma, would you be interested in presenting your methods at our annual Sustainable Agriculture Conference this fall?" she asked. "I think your approach could inspire other young farmers and demonstrate that age is no barrier to innovation." Samuel watched Emma's face light up at the invitation. Public speaking would have terrified most children her age, but Emma saw it as an opportunity to share her knowledge and learn from other agricultural professionals. "I'd love to," Emma replied. "Could I also include information about how business planning applies to small-scale operations? I think a lot of young farmers struggle with the financial aspects of agriculture." The conference presentation became a major focus for Emma throughout the summer months. She worked with Samuel to refine her business model and gathered data to support her conclusions about profitability and sustainability. Her natural teaching abilities emerged as she practiced her presentation, demonstrating an intuitive understanding of how to communicate complex concepts in accessible ways. Meanwhile, other aspects of ranch life continued to evolve around Emma's growing influence. David had kept his promise to spend more time learning the business, visiting regularly, and working alongside Emma on various projects. The two had developed an unexpected partnership, with David's real estate background complementing Emma's operational focus. "We should consider developing agritourism opportunities," David suggested during one of their planning sessions. "People are increasingly interested in understanding where their food comes from, and our heritage breeds will be perfect for educational tours." Emma was immediately interested in the concept. "We could design different experiences for different age groups. Elementary school children could learn about animal care and food production. Adults might be more interested in sustainable agriculture practices and business planning." They developed a comprehensive proposal for ranch tours that would showcase sustainable farming methods while generating additional revenue. Samuel approved the concept, impressed by their collaborative approach and thorough planning. The first ranch tours were scheduled for late summer, coinciding with harvest season when visitors could see the complete agricultural cycle in action. Emma designed interactive demonstrations that engage visitors while educating them about modern farming challenges and solutions. "Why don't you use pesticides on your crops?" asked one visitor during an early tour. "We use integrated pest management instead," Emma explained, leading the group to a demonstration plot. "We rotate crops to break pest cycles, encourage beneficial insects that eat harmful ones, and only use targeted treatments when necessary. It requires more knowledge and planning than just spraying chemicals, but it's better for the soil, the environment, and ultimately for our profitability." The tours were an immediate success, with visitors consistently praising Emma's knowledge and enthusiasm. Local media picked up the story of the young agricultural entrepreneur, bringing additional attention to Morrison Ranch and its innovative approaches. But perhaps the most significant development of Emma's second year was her growing interest in land conservation and environmental stewardship. Her studies had exposed her to concepts of sustainable agriculture and regenerative farming practices that went beyond simple profitability. "Samuel, I've been thinking about our long-term land management strategy," Emma said one evening as they reviewed ranch operations. "We're doing well financially, but I wonder if we could do more to improve soil health and water retention." Samuel was intrigued. Environmental concerns were becoming increasingly important to consumers and regulators, and Emma's interest in these issues demonstrated her understanding of broader trends affecting agriculture. "What did you have in mind?" he asked. Emma had prepared for this conversation with typical thoroughness. She presented research on cover cropping, rotational grazing, and water conservation techniques that could improve both environmental outcomes and long-term productivity. The initial investment would be significant, she acknowledged, but the long-term benefits include reduced input costs, improved soil fertility, and potential eligibility for government conservation incentives. Samuel studied her proposal carefully. Emma had identified specific parcels of ranch land that would benefit most from conservation practices and had developed a phased implementation plan that minimized disruption to existing operations. "This is graduate-level agricultural planning," Samuel told her. "How did you learn about these techniques?" "I've been reading research papers and attending online seminars," Emma replied. "Dr. Chun introduced me to several universities that publish their agricultural research openly. Once I started understanding the scientific basis for different farming practices, it became easier to evaluate which approaches would work best for our specific conditions." Samuel approved Emma's conservation initiative, recognizing both its practical benefits and its value in positioning Morrison Ranch as a leader in sustainable agriculture. The project became another showcase for Emma's abilities, attracting attention from environmental organizations and agricultural policymakers. As fall approached and Emma prepared for her conference presentation, Samuel reflected on the remarkable transformation that had occurred over the past 18 months. The frightened child he had found in his waste heap had evolved into a confident young person whose ideas were influencing the direction of his entire operation. But more than her practical contributions, Emma had brought a sense of purpose and legacy to Morrison Ranch that had been missing for years. Samuel's work had always been profitable, but Emma's presence had given it meaning beyond financial success. The night before Emma's conference presentation, Samuel found her in his study, reviewing her notes one final time. "Nervous?" he asked. "A little," Emma admitted. "I've never spoken to so many professional agriculturalists before. What if they think I'm just a kid playing at being a farmer?" Samuel sat down across from her. "Emma, in the past year, you've developed and implemented business strategies that are generating real profits. You've designed conservation practices that are improving our land quality. You've educated hundreds of visitors about sustainable agriculture. You've earned the respect of university researchers and environmental scientists. Anyone who thinks you're just playing at this hasn't been paying attention." Emma smiled at his reassurance. "I couldn't have done any of it without your support. You gave me the opportunity to try new things and the resources to implement them properly." "I provided the opportunity," Samuel agreed. "But everything you've accomplished is the result of your own intelligence, dedication, and hard work. Tomorrow, when you stand up in front of that conference, remember that you belong there. You've earned your place through results, not just potential." The conference presentation was a triumph. Emma spoke confidently about her heritage chicken operation, her conservation initiatives, and her vision for integrating environmental stewardship with agricultural profitability. The audience of agricultural professionals, university researchers, and policymakers gave her a standing ovation. During the question and answer session, Emma fielded inquiries with poise and expertise that impressed even the most skeptical attendees. "What advice would you give to other young people interested in agriculture?" asked one participant. "Start with something small that you can manage well," Emma replied. "Learn everything you can about both the practical and business sides of farming. Don't be afraid to ask questions or challenge conventional approaches if you think there's a better way. And remember that successful agriculture requires both passion and careful planning." After the presentation, Emma was approached by numerous attendees who wanted to learn more about her methods and philosophy. Several university professors invited her to visit their research facilities. Agricultural extension agents asked if she would be willing to speak to other young farmers in their regions. The little girl who had once built a shelter from discarded materials was now being recognized as an innovative voice in modern agriculture. But as Samuel watched Emma interact with her admirers, he realized that her greatest accomplishment was not any specific project or achievement. It was the way she had transformed adversity into wisdom, using her difficult experiences to develop insights that could benefit others. Emma had not just survived being discarded by society. She had proven that what others considered waste could become something precious with the right care and opportunity. Her journey from waste heap to agricultural conference podium was a testament to the potential that exists in unexpected places, waiting to be discovered by those wise enough to recognize true value when they see it. 5 years had passed since Samuel Morrison discovered Emma in his waste heap, and Morrison Ranch had been transformed into something neither of them could have imagined on that first morning. What began as one man's decision to help a desperate child had evolved into a model agricultural operation that attracted visitors, researchers, and imitators from across the country. Emma was now 16, tall for her age, with the confident bearing of someone who had been making important decisions for years. Her heritage chicken operation had expanded into a diverse, sustainable agriculture program that included heritage breed cattle, heirloom vegetables, and innovative water conservation systems. More importantly, her success had inspired Samuel to restructure the entire ranch around principles of environmental stewardship and community education. The morning of Emma's high school graduation found Samuel in his study, reviewing financial reports that told a remarkable story. Morrison Ranch was more profitable than it had ever been, despite the significant investments in conservation and education programs. The premium prices commanded by their sustainable products more than compensated for the higher production costs, and the agritourism program generated substantial additional revenue. But the numbers told only part of the story. The ranch had become a destination for agricultural students, environmental scientists, and policymakers who came to study the integration of profitability with sustainability. Emma's innovations have been documented in academic papers, featured in agricultural magazines, and adopted by farmers throughout the region. Ready for the big day? Rosa asked as she knocked on Samuel's study door. At 71, Rosa moved more slowly than she once had, but her role as Emma's surrogate grandmother had given her renewed energy and purpose. More ready than Emma, I think, Samuel replied, closing the financial reports. She's been pacing around the kitchen for an hour, convinced she's going to trip during the ceremony. Rosa laughed. That girl has addressed conferences of agricultural scientists and testified before state legislative committees about environmental policy, but she's worried about walking across a stage to receive a diploma. The graduation ceremony was being held at Cedar Falls High School, where Emma had continued her formal education while simultaneously developing her agricultural expertise. Her academic record was exceptional, but more significantly, she had been accepted to every university she had applied to, with full scholarships to several prestigious agricultural programs. As Samuel, Rosa, and David took their seats in the packed auditorium, Samuel reflected on how much their little family had grown and changed. David now spent half his time at the ranch, having discovered a passion for agricultural real estate development that combined his business background with Emma's environmental principles. Together, they had helped several neighboring farmers transition to sustainable practices while maintaining economic viability. Pete Rodriguez, now in his 60s but still energetic, had become something of a celebrity himself as Emma's mentor in animal husbandry. Agricultural publications regularly featured articles about his innovative training methods and his role in developing the next generation of sustainable farmers. The graduation ceremony proceeded with the usual speeches about future possibilities and the importance of education. But when Emma's name was called as valedictorian, the audience's response was unusually enthusiastic. Her classmates had grown accustomed to Emma's unique combination of academic excellence and real-world achievement, but her teachers and the community at large continued to be amazed by her accomplishments. Emma's valedictory speech was characteristically thoughtful and practical rather than sentimental. 5 years ago, I thought education was about learning facts and passing tests, she began. But I've discovered that real education is about learning to see opportunities where others see problems, to find solutions that benefit everyone involved, and to understand that every challenge is also a chance to do something better than it's been done before. She talked about the importance of connecting academic learning with practical application, using her own agricultural projects as examples of how theoretical knowledge could be transformed into beneficial action. The most valuable lesson I've learned is that being discarded by one situation doesn't determine your value in the next one, Emma continued. Sometimes what looks like waste is actually raw material waiting to be transformed into something useful. The same principle applies to people, to land, to ideas, and to opportunities that others might overlook. Samuel felt his eyes water as Emma concluded her speech with a tribute to the people who had supported her journey. I want to thank Samuel Morrison, who saw potential where others might have seen only problems. I want to thank Rosa Martinez, who taught me that taking care of others is the foundation of all success. I want to thank Pete Rodriguez, who showed me that expertise combined with patience can accomplish anything. And I want to thank David Morrison, who proved that family can be built through shared commitment rather than just shared DNA. The standing ovation lasted several minutes, with many audience members wiping away tears. Emma's story had become well known in the community, and her graduation represented not just personal achievement, but proof that circumstances of birth need not determine outcomes in life. After the ceremony, the Morrison family gathered at the ranch for a celebration that included neighbors, ranch employees, and many of the agricultural professionals who had become part of Emma's extended network. Dr. Sarah Chun, now a close family friend, had driven down from the university to attend the graduation and to discuss Emma's plans for college. Have you made a final decision about universities? Dr. Chun asked Emma as they stood on the back porch watching the sunset over the ranch. I'm going to stay close to home for my undergraduate degree, Emma replied. The agricultural program at State University will let me continue working on ranch projects while completing my coursework. After that, maybe graduate school somewhere that specializes in sustainable agriculture policy. Dr. Chun nodded approvingly. You'll be able to contribute more to the research community if you maintain your practical experience alongside your academic studies. Some of the most innovative agricultural scientists are people who never lost touch with actual farming. Samuel joined their conversation, curious about Emma's long-term plans. What do you see yourself doing 10 years from now? He asked. Emma was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. I want to help other young people discover that agriculture can be both environmentally responsible and financially rewarding, she said finally. There are so many problems in our food system that could be solved by people who understand both the science and the business aspects of farming. I think my role might be teaching and demonstrating that sustainability and profitability don't have to be opposites. You mean like what you've been doing here for the past few years? Samuel observed with a smile. Exactly, but on a larger scale. I want to help develop programs that give other kids the same opportunities I've had. Not everyone needs to be rescued from a waste heap, but a lot of young people could benefit from mentorship and real-world learning experiences. This conversation led to the evening's most significant development. David, who had been listening while managing the barbecue, suggested that Morrison Ranch could formalize its role as an educational center. We're already hosting tours and research visits, David pointed out. What if we developed a structured internship program for high school and college students interested in sustainable agriculture? Emma could help design the curriculum, and we could partner with universities to offer academic credit. The idea excited Emma immediately. We could create different tracks for different interests. Some students might focus on the business aspects, others on environmental science, others on animal husbandry or crop management. The ranch is diverse enough to support multiple specializations. Samuel found himself getting caught up in their enthusiasm. We need additional housing for interns, probably some classroom space for formal instruction. But we have the land and the resources to make it work. By the end of the evening, they had outlined a comprehensive plan for the Morrison Ranch Agricultural Institute, a program that would combine practical training with academic rigor to prepare the next generation of sustainable agriculture professionals. It seems fitting, Rosa observed as they cleaned up after the party. This place saved Emma, and now Emma wants to use it to save others. The summer after Emma's graduation was spent developing the institute concept and applying for the necessary permits and accreditations. Emma worked with Dr. Chun and other university contacts to ensure that the program would meet academic standards while maintaining its practical focus. The first group of interns arrived in September, just as Emma began her freshman year at State University. 12 students from across the region came to Morrison Ranch for a semester-long program that combined hands-on agricultural work with coursework in business, environmental science, and sustainable farming practices. Emma served as a peer mentor and teaching assistant, sharing her knowledge while continuing her own education. Her ability to connect with students who came from backgrounds similar to her own proved invaluable in helping them adapt to the program's demands. Emma understands that agriculture isn't just about growing things, one intern told Samuel during a mid-semester evaluation. She shows us how everything connects: the business planning, the environmental impact, the community relationships. She makes it all seem manageable instead of overwhelming. The success of the initial program exceeded everyone's expectations. All 12 interns completed the program successfully, with several deciding to change their majors to agricultural fields as a result of their experience. Universities began requesting partnerships with the Institute, and agricultural organizations started referring promising young students to the program. By the end of Emma's freshman year, the Morrison Ranch Agricultural Institute had a waiting list of applicants and funding support from multiple agricultural foundations. Emma had achieved her goal of creating opportunities for other young people while continuing her own education and development. On the 5th anniversary of the day, Samuel found Emma in his waste heap. The two of them took a walk to the site where her shelter had once stood. The area had been transformed into a demonstration plot for heritage vegetables, with carefully maintained beds showcasing heirloom varieties that had been nearly extinct before conservation efforts restored them. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had just called the police that morning instead of talking to me? Emma asked as they stood among the flourishing plants. Samuel considered the question seriously. I think about it sometimes. You probably would have ended up in foster care, eventually aged out of the system, and found some way to make a decent life for yourself. You're too smart and determined to have been defeated by circumstances. But would I have had the same opportunities to develop my interests and abilities? Probably not, Samuel admitted. And I certainly wouldn't have learned as much as I have from having you in my life. This ranch is a better place because of your ideas and energy. Emma smiled and picked up a handful of rich, dark soil from one of the beds. You know what I've realized? That morning when you found me, we were both kind of discarded in different ways. You had all this success and wealth, but you were isolated from meaningful relationships. I was literally living in your garbage pile. But together, we created something that neither of us could have accomplished alone. Samuel nodded, struck by the insight. You're right. I had resources, but no real purpose beyond making money. You had purpose, but no resources to implement your ideas. Together, we found a way to make both our lives more meaningful. And now we're helping other people find the same kind of purpose and opportunity, Emma added. The Institute is taking what we learned about mentorship and education and sharing it with people who might otherwise never discover their potential. As they walked back toward the ranch house, Samuel reflected on the unexpected turns his life had taken. At 67, he was more energetic and engaged than he had been in decades. The ranch was more successful than ever, but more importantly, it had become a source of positive change that extended far beyond its boundaries. Emma was now a confident young woman with a bright future ahead of her, but she remained grounded in the values and work ethic that had emerged from her difficult early experiences. She had transformed herself from a discarded child into a leader and innovator, proving that potential exists in unexpected places and that the right support can help anyone overcome their circumstances. The quiet ranch mogul had indeed found treasure in his waste heap, but the real discovery was not Emma herself. It was the recognition that value often lies hidden beneath unpromising surfaces, waiting to be revealed by those wise enough to look beyond immediate appearances to underlying possibilities. Morrison Ranch had become living proof that sustainable success comes not from exploiting resources for short-term gain, but from nurturing potential and creating environments where both people and land can flourish for generations to come. Emma's journey from waste heap to agricultural leadership had shown that the most valuable discoveries often come not from seeking them out, but from being open to recognizing them when they appear in the most unexpected places.